Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of the City Council, City of Pearland for Monday, November the 26th, year 2018. If you'll please rise, we'll have an invocation tonight by Councilmember Perez, and our Deputy City Manager, John Branson, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you'll bow your heads. Dear Lord, bless us in the decisions that we are making today. Help to guide us to make the best decisions for those for which we serve. Bless the citizens of Pearland, Brazoria County, state of Texas, and the United States. Bless our first responders and bless our military servicemen and veterans. In your name we pray, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I want to thank all of our fine citizens who are here tonight, and as it grows right after Thanksgiving, well, I'm sure that you probably have some turkey feathers left with you, and save them. They make good bonnets for later on when you need to go take the warpath. But I'd like to introduce a group here tonight that, the scouting movement, both in the Girl Scout and Boy Scout movement, are one of the finest ways for developing young citizens to prepare them for leadership in our nation in the future. And we're honored tonight to have several of them here, plus their leaders. And let me introduce Cub Pack 414 Cub Scouts and ask them to stand, and the adult leadership, and Pack 446 Boy Scouts. And I understand there's a Boy Scout here tonight. Okay, that's him. Okay, and Eileen Mellon is the then leader of the previous Cub Masters of Pack 414, and I did not get your name, but if you, wonderful, ladies and gentlemen, this is a fine group of people here. They're joining us for a little while. I know that right after turkey dinner, the school is back in session now, so they're going to have to try to go back pretty early. But thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for having an opportunity to share with you what we do on Monday nights in behalf of our citizens. And so thank you very much, both of you all as adult leaders. Thank you so much. With that information in the record, I'm using the same agenda that you have. Moving to item number 3, roll call. We are here except for Councilmember Little, and but we do have a quorum, and we are here to conduct our business tonight. And as we go through the process of working, moving in our agenda to item number 4, citizen comments. I'll ask Councilmember Perez if he has any.
Mayor, we have not received any individuals that like to speak during public comment session at this time, so I think we're free to move forward.
Okay, with that information on the record, let's move down to the next item on our agenda, which is consent agenda. I'll ask Councilmember Carbone if he would present this for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, approval of consent agenda items A through F. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Mayor, I'd like to pull item number 3 on that.
Well, item what?
3. C?
I think item 3 is on the, that's not part of consent agenda.
What did you want to pull?
No, never mind. Never mind.
He wanted to speak on an item that's already on the public comment. It's not part of the consent agenda.
Okay. We have Madam Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed, Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving in our agenda, and there's one on scrolling up and down the wall over there for y'all to, in the audience could use those to follow what we're trying to do here tonight. Moving to item 5 on our agenda, which is matters removed from the consent agenda. There were none tonight. Moving to item number 5, 6 on our agenda, calls for new business. Item number 1 on new business is Councilmember Reed. Would you present this for our considerations? All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration, possible action, resolution number R 2018-189. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening. Item 1 for you tonight is the second reading. I'm sorry, this is the resolution. We did have this prior, and this is our financial policies. We want to start looking at those on a semi-regular basis, and this includes some updates, some wordsmithing updates, but there's also some added language in there trying to clarify what we'd intended in terms of the contract lengths for city procurements and professional services, et cetera. And so that's been encapsulated in here and described. So I think it's ready for your consideration based on some of the questions we got at the last time.
That information in the record. Does council have any question or comment at this point? Hearing no comments, Mr. Secretary, we do have a motion on the floor.
Councilmember Reed,
I do have a question before we vote.
Okay. Hold that vote. Councilmember Reed.
In the packet, it doesn't, well, they go back to multi-year. I mean, it took away the 5-year, went back to multi-year, like on page 28. Again on page 29, page 30. I mean, where can you show me where the limitation is? Like where exactly is the contract limitation?
Sure. Section of that. So on the clean version of the attachment, the resolution for your consideration starts under section 4, expenditures, subsection C. It talks about that. Purchasing as the 3 years there. And this is what we've predominantly been doing. And then it says, you can go up to 5. And then again, this is what we talked about earlier this fall. And I believe we had a consensus on that. And you can only do that if there was a supermajority under those circumstances. But it would go out as per, after 3 years.
And that's prevailing over all service contracts, correct?
Yes. I believe the exceptions have been written out that had been there previously.
So this allows room for I think John, you had stated that things like a contract with TXU or something like that for lights. I mean,
we have a power contract that we just considered last time that if the council and future councils see that there's a prevailing need or best interest of the city, you still have the option under this. I mean, it's a resolution policy, so it could be changed, frankly, anyway, but this would be our operating guidelines.
And then I saw that y'all changed the bond issuance to 20 years instead of 25.
That has been done prior. I think this was just catching up of this language in this document to that. We've been doing that for 3 years probably.
Okay.
Longer than that.
It's just after I got here, so it was not too much
making
longer.
sure- Just putting it in
Yeah.
writing. Or
Sorry?
just updating this document.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
So
Thank you for,
Yep.
for making those changes from the last meeting.
Were there any follow-up questions?
yeah, so the multi-year is that, I seem to recall that Cynthia had mentioned that was just best practice language. Is that why that's used?
You're talking about the language that you talked about that you want to put back in there?
Councilmember Reed just mentioned where it says multi-year, I think Cynthia last time said that was just best practice language. Is that why that's used specifically?
Yeah, I believe previously we had a 5-year in there, and moving it to multi-year just allows us flexibility with, where we go. Frankly, once you get out past 3 years, there's not a whole lot of utility to it. The best practice is really 3. We've included 2 out years, so we have an adopted budget plus 2 in our budgets for as long as I've been here. Not that that's that long, but that's been our practice, and this is really just updating that to reflect that.
Okay, thanks.
I think this is a carryover from this is on our agenda for the last meeting, previous meeting, and was asked to to move to the following agenda, which is tonight. And I think staff has probably has addressed most of the concerns and questions that were asked at the original meeting the last council meeting. Any further comment from the council before we move on?
Mayor, I'd just like to ask staff, with the change on the language on Part 4C, purchasing, the terms of the contract, where do you see that becoming an issue in the future, if any?
An issue in terms of like hamstringing the city
Yeah.
or trying to, I mean, that's what we do for 95% of our contracts now. To me, it's just when you have something like, the one that keeps coming up is the refuse contract, that there'd have to be some extra consideration if the city wanted to go out longer than the 5 with a supermajority to do that. And I don't know if that's an insurmountable or a terrible hurdle. I mean, you want the option, but yet there's more scrutiny towards that. So the rest of them for services and things, I mean, I think we should be going out and testing the market and seeing what's out there. And we can always stay with an incumbent as long as they compete for it and give us the best proposal and go from there. Is it some more? I'm not answering. I'm sorry if I'm not.
No, that makes sense. I just, I'm at the last meeting, kind of voiced my concern over that, and I'm still struggling. So I'll probably be a no vote.
So Clay, two other things, the bond counsel and the financial advisors, the former policy allowed that for an extended period of time, and that was so that, it takes a while for those individuals to get caught up to speed with what we're doing and get the process down. So those are the only 2 other areas above and beyond what Mr. Pearson just mentioned that I can think of is of a major change.
Yeah, and that's kind of where my concern is. I mean, I'm coming up in 5+ years, and it's taken several years to fully understand some of the financing vehicles and kind of how that works. And a lot of my time I've relied back on those experts that have had the longer knowledge. So, yeah, I don't. In some circumstances, I think that's certainly valuable. And I don't know that I don't know that I've had. I think we're fixing a problem or fixing an issue and creating a bigger issue down the road.
We do have the ability to modify the contract, and if staff, I mean, typically these contracts are passed unanimously anyway. They're rarely so controversial what's presented to us that we're going to have a whole lot of issues with the contract. We may have issues with the service, but not necessarily the contract. I think we should entrust staff to come with us. If they think that there's a 7-year contract that's beneficial to us, they would come with us with their recommendation with just the instruction that requires a supermajority. So I don't think it's really going to hamstring us as long as we're not voting on anything that's controversial or non-controversial.
And not to mention, I mean, I'm not bond counsel for anybody, and my firm doesn't do that kind of work, but I find it hard to believe that it takes a number of years to get up to date from a bond counsel standpoint. Maybe a couple years, and for our own understanding, I know it may take a while, but I guess that's why that 1 year extension is there, and then the other year extension, and obviously if they want to remain, like we've had the same bond counsel for what 20 some odd years, and he's done a great job. I guess the whole thing with this is don't get comfortable. Not just that, new council members come and go, and so they're elected by whomever, by the residents of Pearland to make decisions for them, and so they don't have the opportunity to make certain decisions. It's kind of like that they're sitting up here for a number of years, not doing much, or they're doing something, but they're not. They don't get to see things, come into fruition, or see things come by their desk. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I was reminded, I tend to would agree that the professional services, you're going to get somebody that needs to compete and has that expertise, and, you have to make that judgment. I think there's more, you asked about the hamstringing for the city. There's probably more legitimate for a service contract where they have to make a significant capital investment. If you're going to go into a contract for waste hauling in the city of Pearland, it's a big undertaking. You got to buy the trucks and et cetera. It doesn't make as much sense, and it's not going to be as good a deal for the city if it's a short time frame. I mean, I don't want to claim what the return is on that, but somebody's going to make an investment like that and gear up. They need to know that as long as they perform, they're going to have the contract for a decent amount of time to get that back. So that's probably a better example where it may come up and have more legitimacy to it to have a longer run on it.
And I think that's kind of a self-policing issue. If we're going to get, if we send out for a request for proposal for a service such as that requires infrastructure, we're either going to get high bids for short-term contracts. We have to figure out why, or we're going to get feedback from the service provider that says we're not interested in responding to this unless it's at least a 5 or a 7 year proposal, at which point it would come to us and require supermajority. I think I understand what Councilmember Carbone is saying. I just think it's one of those things that self-polices, and functionally it wouldn't necessarily hurt us. We could also preemptive to issuing out the RFP, have an action by council that we go out, we issue the RFP with a contract of a length that exceeds the 3 year with the 2 year extension preemptively, so that at least we can go out in earnest with the RFP. I think I understand what Councilmember Carbone is saying. I just think that there's simple ways around it to where we don't really have to reinvent this wheel again. I think we can move forward with it personally.
I've got on 1B under financial and management reporting, 1B3 to be specific, it says that we're going to seek to obtain the Government Finance Officer Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. I understand that it's a good thing to have an independent confirmation of the quality of our reporting. Is there, however, what is that process, and is there a cost associated with that, or
I think there is a filing fee. It's less than $1,000, something like that, but it's peer reviewed, and so they've got a criteria that they review and give you that feedback, so you can fine tune and improve it. So it's healthy to have that look. It's not the numbers; it's the formatting and what have you. So I think it's different than what we pay for with a outside auditor.
There's some metric that we use for us to see if that's actually helping us improve the way that we're handling our accounting or something?
Yeah, I mean, you get the report back and you see if we're following those, and you would think that gets updated as you go along. It's not the same thing every year for 20 years. We've won the award, earned the certificate for 20 years, and what we do today is different than what we did each year. So it keeps you sharp and keeps you from falling too far behind too. So.
Okay. What was is this something that, is there another equivalent to this, or is this?
Not that I know of. I mean, GFOA and their certificates, the standard nationally, internationally for that. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other question or comment? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone.
No.
Motion passed 5-1.
Information in the record. Let's move to new business item number 2. Councilmember Perez, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action resolution number R 2018-225. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
So the city has, one of our water sources is from City Houston system, and out at the northwest part of the city, we've got a take there, and we've got 2 existing ground storage tanks. To improve our system, have good reliability and redundancy, we have a capital improvement plan that we're well aware of for a new 3rd ground storage tank there in Alameda Road, 521. This contract would be for the construction of that tank, and recommend your approval so we can proceed with the construction. We just put a new water main up Alameda, so we're building out the system and getting it fit for today and tomorrow with all these improvements.
Would that be filled by the Houston contract for surface water,
Yep.
water, Houston?
Yep.
That's about the
Mayor
closest.
Reed, at the time until the surface water treatment plant comes online, yes, water would be filled from the City of Houston take point that's located there.
Okay, good. Good, thank you. Council, have any question or comment on this item?
Yes, Mayor. So what's the, you had mentioned that this is going to be filled with the take water from the city of Houston, but is that terminus once we get our surface water treatment plant on? Or are we going to continue to take water at that location?
Currently, our contract right now is set for about 1.3 million gallons per day as take or pay. So we'd want to be able to take that because we're paying for that amount. And so we'd minimize to there. The other option we're taking a look at is see if we can visit with Houston when that time comes to take a look at possibly just being as an emergency connection over time.
Okay. And then one last question. Are we going to be, have we looked at or have we accommodated for any impacts that the 521 expansion may have on this project? Are we confident that there's not, as 521 expands, that there's not going to have any impacts to this?
That's correct. It's already, it's out of the way. They're not looking to expand in 521 any more than the right-of-way that's already been dedicated. In the plat in Shadow Creek, there was an additional 5 feet that was dedicated back when the Shadow Creek plats came through there to get the ultimate right-of-way width.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question or comment from council? Secretary, we have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving in our agenda to item number 3, new business. Councilmember Hernandez, would you provide this for our consideration?
Yes, sir, Mayor. It's consideration and possible action resolution number R 2018-226. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
So for our water system, we also have a groundwater takes, and one of those pumps is located on Bailey Road, just east of our recreation center, natatorium. And the water that we get out of the ground there needs additional treatments to make sure it's as good as possible. And so this design contract will provide the systems to do that, the filtering. And then also we have designs for a new repair the existing tank there. We had damaged that. And so that's all wrapped into here, and recommending this consideration for the design to get that work constructed next year.
Council, any question or comment?
Yes, Mayor. Just a couple of things. So do we think that with these modifications that we're going to make to better treat the iron and magnesium that we're getting out of that well point, do we think that's going to resolve or help to resolve some of the water quality issues we're having in the area?
Yes, that's why we're doing the work, is to get that filtering and improve that. So the report will give us the information to quantify that, but that's why we're doing this.
And it's we think that that's the principal issue for the water quality issues.
Councilman Perez, with regards to the iron and manganese, the system that we'll be taking, we'll take that out. That well has actually been off for several years and not in the system.
Yes, sir.
And so that will address that. And then that well also supplements and actually feeds further down Dixie Farm Road and further down Bailey into that area, so we can get redundancy in that area. It does not come back into the Canterbury Park area at this time.
If I remember correctly, we had to put that well back into service recently. And is that why we saw a spike in water quality, or am I misremembering?
That's incorrect, Councilman Perez. That well did not get back in service. We were trying to put that plant back in service to be as kind of a rebooster station.
Okay.
And to boost the pressure back up.
But the well remained out of service.
That is correct.
Okay. And do we already know which 3 treatment processes that they want to experiment with?
Well, most common is the green sand filter, but they also have researched 2 others that we'll want to pilot as well. I don't know the physical names of those, but our consultant is here that could answer that question.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a little bit about those other programs if they're here.
This is Jordan Hibbs from Endoprec Hibbs and Todd, and he'll be able to answer your question.
Is this on? Yeah. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Jordan Hibbs with Improtec Hibbs and Todd. Like Robert said, green sand is the most common. There's also a material called zeolite that we're going to look to pilot. And there's also some oxidation technologies to potentially oxidize those secondary contaminants out of the water before it is disinfected and put into the potable water system. So those are the 3 main ones now. We're still doing research at this point, but those are the 3 that we're looking at right now.
So, do those treatment methods have they been utilized in by other municipalities as of yet?
Yes, sir.
And how long have they been in use?
Green sand's been around for years and years and years.
The other 2 that are more experimental.
Zeolite, there's a couple plants, I believe, in Texas that have that, groundwater plants. It's more common in the Northeast United States. And then the oxidation technology is used sparingly throughout the state. They're more up and coming, if you will.
So we're not in an experimental phase with respect to the treatment. We may be in an experimental phase with respect to this particular volume of manganese and iron.
That's exactly right, and that's why Robert and I worked together to propose piloting to really prove to ourselves and that whatever we ultimately decide is going to work, and do a proof test before we design it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to, I guess, once we get to that point, when we make the decision, just have a better understanding of the long-term ramifications of whatever treatment method that we utilize, or at least know that it's been utilized for a long period of time, that we're not adopting an experimental program that we may not necessarily have vetted for in use for a couple of decades, and then, in 10 years, we're going to have to redo the treatment method because there's ramifications that we can consider or didn't know existed.
Yeah, Councilman Perez, you're correct. And what we'll do is as we get through that process, of course, our Thursday package memos would come up as we go along in that design process. And as we get to those milestones, those would be things that will be developed. And of course, life cycle cost, reliability, all that plays into a factor. But we want to have a couple options that are out there versus just selecting the traditional green sand methodology. With EHT, they came up with a couple other options that they researched during the proposal phase of this. And pilot study is the best thing to make sure we maximize and test out and make sure we do what we're supposed to do to treat the well.
Good. Would you please give us your name and the company so we'll know who made those fine comments?
Yes, my name is Jordan Hibbs with Improtec Hibbs and Todd.
Okay, good. So the recording will have, it's being recorded, it will prepare it so we know who made the comments.
Sir.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Hibbs, I presume you're one of the partners of the firm?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Where's your office at?
We're located in Abilene, Texas. We have offices in Lubbock and in Granbury.
Okay, but you don't have local offices, correct?
No, sir, we do not have a local office here.
Are you expanding to the area? I guess what my question is and I'm going to steal a little bit of thunder, and I'll let Councilmember Owens ask some further questions because I know he's got some concerns. But I guess one of my concerns would be if you're not local, how responsive can you be? How much are we going to be paying for travel? And issues of that nature, particularly as an engineering hub, we have a lot of firms local that can provide this service. So,
Honestly, I appreciate that question, and we get asked that question all the time down here. Our firm started working down here in 2007 in Missouri City. We did Missouri City's groundwater reduction surface water plant. We've done Richmond and done a few other South Houston, I think City of South Houston, a couple other places around here. I kind of jokingly tell people I am the Houston office for EHT. I'm essentially down here once a week. So responsive time, and I would encourage you guys, if there's concern there, to reach out to some of our clients down here and talk to them and ask them their opinion. But we have really not experienced any issues with response time, and we believe your staff will get to feel like we're right down the road.
Any other comments by council?
Yeah,
Owens?
just quick, and Councilmember got into it with that. So no Houston offices.
Move closer to your mic.
Okay. So there's not any Houston offices. And so I was wondering, as a part of this, I think construction phase services
Yes, sir.
is also part of it. And from what I read in here, that it'd be more the monitors than actual construction inspectors.
I believe, did we have construction inspection in the contract, Robert? I brought it right here.
Councilman Owen, we have them to be construction administration, like we normally have. We have construction inspectors that we have on site. They'll be making their visits as the project is being developed. We also have in there, they have a component that they have some great operators that work for EHT that'll come down and will also be doing and conducting startup and testing and training of this technology that we choose for our staff so that they are brought up to speed on how the system operates. So yes, we're very comfortable with what we have right now.
And I was just wondering if we actually do some inspection out there on it. You know, I've never been one to really have somebody that designed a product to be an inspector over construction. Just because something may happen that has to come back to the city. And I'm wondering if the people doing the inspection out there that did designing, if they're going to be open to come in and do a change order and you pay for it on there. And one other thing that was in there, it says during the inspections, there's no guarantee over contractor's performance of work, no liability, no responsibility for the contractor's failure to furnish and perform work in accordance with the contract. Kind of wondering, that kind of makes me leery of you doing the inspection out there if you have no liability on it. And I guess as being a monitor, if you see something being constructed that is wrong, then you have to call the city and get a city employee out there to stop the project. You're not able to do that. Because if you do, you'll take on liability for stopping the contractor.
Councilman Owen, let me step back on that with regards to that. And we will have inspection services. It will not be, it may not be through, it will not be through EHT. We'll have our inspectors that are there doing that. So they'll be checking and monitoring the contractor as it belongs to make sure that they adhere to the specifications. Also, if the engineer is on site and takes a look and they are not adhering to the specifications, you know, they'll let us know to uphold that contractor to make sure that those specifications are being met.
And also, if you, I guess it's on page 18 or 19 when you're looking at it, it kind of makes me believe that there's not going to be an inspector out there at all times. It's just certain occasions that the inspector be out there.
I think the intent of my contract was not to have inspection, full-time resident project rep in my contract, that was something the city would have outside of my contract as a third party, I do believe. Robert can correct me.
Okay, so you wouldn't have anybody out there full-time
Right,
inspection.
and I think what you read was just our periodic inspections when we come down for, say, monthly construction status meetings, items like that. the engineer will, myself or whoever's down from our office will make inspections at that time, just snapshots in time, while the city's going to have either a third party or city staff, I don't know, doing
That's our
full-time.
standard scope of services that engineers handle, is that they do not do the day-to-day inspections. They handle the periodic review of the project as part of the monthly or biweekly construction meetings. And we will have either third-party or city employee inspectors doing the day-to-day, daily inspections, daily work reports, and all of that type of inspection.
Okay, and to follow up one on Councilmember Perez, I didn't see any dollars in there, money in there for travel of sending people down here on a monthly basis or what have you. I'm sure they have to come down during the day, spend the night or whatever to do it. And I didn't see anything in the contract on the pricing of it that included that price for them to do that.
Do they have the breakdown spreadsheet, Robert?
Yes, they do. It's in their, let me get to the last page. Their pricing is in there.
It's on the far, not the furthest right column, but the second to furthest right column. We just have expenses there.
It's also, Councilman Owens, it says that if there is any actual cost for lodging and meals, it's just at the actual cost. There's no markup.
Okay, well, it didn't reflect that in there. Reimbursement expenses, all it said. And
It's in
it's
there.
got a blank out beside it.
That completes your comments.
It's in
Any other question or comment from council?
Yeah, I did, I'm sure y'all good at what you do, but I'm sure there's people here locally, and I'm saying locally with the Houston area that does the same typical type of work on there. And kind of was hoping there'd be something that y'all had an office here or would open one or have people down here most of the time to be involved in it. So that was my main concern on there.
Any other question or comment from council? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, I think we have a motion second on the floor here.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving in our new business agenda to item number 4, Councilmember Moore, you do the honor.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action resolution number R2018-199. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
So this is a big infrastructure night for us, and appropriate, council just got their hard copies of the adopted capital improvement program. One of the needs that's been identified is for updates and modernization of the Berry Rose water reclamation plant. That existing facility is in need of compliance upgrades and then also expansion. So we've got a major undertaking there. This gets kicked off with a major engineering design contract, recommending that to Stantec tonight for the $5.1 million to carry us through for all the intricacies, the regulatory filings, and making sure that gets done correctly. We are, as part of this, expanding that and longer term looking to decommission, take down the Longwood plant, and then direct that flow over here as part of the efforts. So more flow will be going in here, not only from new construction, but also existing to make that more efficient.
That information is available. Council have any questions or comments? Councilmember Perez?
Just real quick, so this design contract includes the shuttering of Longwood, replacement of that treatment plant to a lift station to get the flows over to Berry Rose.
That is correct. Councilman Perez will be looking at a regional lift station and a route to take that as a force main back up to Berry Rose.
Okay, thank you.
And are we all online with TCEQ permitting? I know they've been really slow lately.
We'll be handling that as we go in that process for that submission.
Okay.
And they have working, all our engineers that we hire and contract with all have great relationships with TCQ, and we'll go through that permitting process as necessary.
Okay, I just know, like I said, they're pretty slow right now on permitting.
I've only got a couple of things here, and one is just a clarification. It says in the statement there, TCQ's philosophy for reducing the number of treatment plants to regional. And then a couple of sentences down, it says that the TCQ requirement. Is it a philosophy or a requirement to go to regional?
It's a philosophy to be able to go down to regional. It also minimizes the number of plants that we have operational with multiple plants. This way we can get down to more focused and regional. I know City of Houston has been in that mode as directed as well.
Okay, and I noticed in there also that in the
Just
Stantec.
real quick for clarification, is it in that second paragraph on page 2 that you're referring to the TCEQ?
Yeah.
So that requirement is actually from the last or a previous assessment of the plant that noted that Longwood plant would need a major rehabilitation and expansion to be able to continue complying with TCEQ requirements.
Yeah, I would imagine that Longwood plant was under water during Harvey.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing, and Stantec, I see that you got local subs, 5 engineering, I believe, and then geotech over there with geotest. And also inside your contract, it references surveying and right-of-way. Do you have subs doing that? Is Stantec doing their own surveying and right-of-way, or what? It mentions that it within the scope of services. Is anybody here from Stantec?
Just a moment, Councilman. We're looking up.
Since we're recording this, if you don't mind giving your name and address and what company you represent.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is John Keene. I represent Stantec Consulting.
Okay.
And the question was, is survey and right-of-way services included in our contract? And that is yes. We're handling that in-house.
So you don't go, Stantec's going to do their own surveying, I guess,
Yes, sir.
and then your own right-of-way? Is that acquisition, or is that just identifying?
It would be supporting the city of Pearland with the acquisition process.
Okay.
So
Being that
meets
we're getting
bounds.
some money out of the state on some of this, I would imagine. Is there a minority requirement or total requirement of the contract? I noticed with the 5 engineering and geotest, it comes up to, what, about 400 and something thousand altogether?
There's none that's required at this time, Councilman. We're looking towards the process of heading towards Texas Water Development Board funding opportunities, and this is why this project was advertised, and so that we can head down that funding mechanism. But as of right now, no, there's not a requirement of that.
It's not a requirement even if we'll get funding out of the state?
That'll be determined by the state at that time.
Yeah, and normally
We'd be
it is.
looking probably at construction, not necessarily design.
Okay. So I really didn't note Stantec that y'all did surveying, to be honest with you, right away.
We do. We actually have a pretty large group here in Houston that does surveying.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, of Stantec. And, okay. All right, well, that was just my concern on there. One was on the philosophy versus the requirement, the statement of a requirement. And then I noticed, but when you come in, you add the 2 firms up, that's one's a WBE and one's a DBE. That does come up, about 8%, 10%, something like that. So, okay.
Any other questions or comment at this point?
Mayor, I got a question. So with this expansion, is that going to trigger any tree mitigation or sidewalks or anything?
Be fencing for sure, but take a look at that. Will be a discussion with our planning department to determine what requirements are necessary.
All right. Does anybody else in the city would make any exceptions?
we'd be coordinating with our planning department as we take a look at what the improvements require.
Okay.
So no chain link fence?
This is for the design, and we'll bring that back to you. But I believe there is an exemption for utility projects, which you would see for center points in the, BD4s of the world. That's in the existing code, so.
Okay.
So it's not applicable to every project, apparently.
I think that plant over there could use some screening on it.
There's no doubt about that. That'll be a part of it.
This project's been in the mill for a considerable amount of time, and I think it follows the TCEQ's recommendation that you have as few regional plants as possible for maintenance and operation and governance, and that also reduces the number of lift stations and things that have caused us problems over the years, the frequency of them. So I think this is a very good job, but I think it's long overdue. If there's no further questions, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving to our agenda item number 5, Councilmember Owens, would you do number 5, new business?
Okay.
Send it for our consideration.
It's number 5.
Yes, number 5.
Consideration possible action resolution number R 2018-224. So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second word discussion. Staff report.
So one of the projects that we're very pleased to be able to present is the actual construction for widening safety improvements of Hughes Ranch Road. This is from Cullen all the way over to Smith Ranch. At Smith Ranch, it'll tie into T-ramp there that'll give access right on to not only Smith Ranch, but then the 288 toll infrastructure. So it's all been coordinated. This is a project that's been long in design, and significantly, this construction's 80% federal funded through the regional TIP program. So as with many of our capital improvements, staff, Trent and others, Robert, have been very successful in getting us in line for this funding. So rather than this all being on the city's dime locally, the large majority of that's coming from those federal funds. And this project too is being advanced earlier than had been anticipated. So it's going to be in service quicker, working for us because we're able to adjust some projects and get this moved up in the TIP hierarchy. So I think it's a win-win-win in delivering on what's been promised in terms of the road infrastructure, and recommend consideration to be able to start on that construction as soon as possible. The contractor's Triple B, as you can see there, and look forward to bringing that to fruition.
Council have any question or comment on this item?
I do, Mayor. At what point do they put in the sound wall on this project?
That is a part of the project, and I should mention too that something that Pearland can take credit for. We've got a new standard apparently that TxDOT's going to be accepting for those walls, those barriers. That's significantly less expensive, but they'll be a part of the project. Those tend to happen towards the end of it, just so the grades are established, you're not messing things up, but that'll be a part of the project.
So I know that there's 2 homes that are divided by, I think it's Sterling, that are essentially on the same side of the road as the Crystal Lake subdivision. And those homes sit closer to Hughes Ranch than what the homes on Crystal Lake do, but they're not getting any sound wall there.
So we've been through some of the questions that came up along those lines, and part of it's dictated by the studies, but also what was there before. I don't know if you can want to amplify that more, but we're doing what's required, and there's reasons for that. I don't know if Trent or Robert can talk about that a little bit more.
When the studies are conducted on the sound walls and doing those decibels across for noise analysis, is that they take a look pre and post, but then there's also a what's called a feasible cost benefit analysis that's done with it as well, and what's the benefit. And those two particular homes that you're mentioning did not qualify on that cost benefit analysis for that, and also they were set that they, if I recall the study correctly, did not meet the requirements.
Turn my mic on.
Any other questions?
I can understand that, but it just kind of boggles my mind that, you know, these homes are actually closer to the roadway, but they don't qualify. It kind of scares me that when McLean Road gets widened, that the same thing's going to happen to me. And it's, you know, it's noisy now with just 2 lanes there. And, you know, by right, I chose to live there. But if the road's going to go to 4 lanes, you're putting that much more traffic, that much more noise. I have concerns that when that happens, I'll fall in the same situation where we won't qualify.
Any other question or comment?
Yeah, the question, look, so it's ending at Smith Ranch, from Cullen to Smith Ranch, and there's going to be, it says the future ramp to the toll lanes. What is the timeline as far as matching those, like when this is finished versus having the ramp and stuff done, I'm assuming is totally separate? Is all that going to be coordinated to be a seamless kind of?
Councilman Rand, the statement with regards to the T-ramp and the 288 corridor project for the toll lanes is, yes, that's one of the reasons why we also took a look at trying to move up Hughes Ranch Road, and also Smith Ranch Road is being designed to be in construction as well, to try and tie all those construction completion dates reasonably tied close together so that we aren't in a perpetual state of construction. So that is the goal. You'll see some construction work already being done in the area of that intersection, and proceed from there. T-ramp. The T-ramp, Trent was just reminding me, the T-ramp will be looking at being completed in about late third quarter of next calendar year. So that'd be the August, September timeframe, and then that'll be ahead of where we're at, so that can be done, and then we'll tie right into it. And that'll include a new intersection at Hughes Ranch Road, Smith Ranch Road, with a signal light.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question or comment from council? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving in our agenda, items 6, 7, and 8, which represents new resolutions R2 2018-227, 2018-228, and Resolution 229. I'll ask City Attorney to address this issue for us.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. This is these 3 resolutions that you just referenced are continuing the city's process of acquiring right-of-way for the McCard Road project. And if you recall, the last time we did these, we had about 5 of them at one time, and we actually put those on a special meeting ahead of the council agenda, and that's typically would be the norm when we have a large number of them. Because we only had 3 this evening, we put them on this agenda. And just to give you a heads up, December the 10th, we'll have at least 6, maybe 7. And so we will put those on a special meeting agenda prior to the meeting so that they won't be on the regular agenda, but we can do that earlier beforehand. So the standard protocol for this has been for me to go ahead and read each resolution out loud as required by state law. Takes a little bit of time to do so, so I appreciate everyone's patience. But I think I was going to do that this evening. Before I do that, I'll obviously open it up to any questions. I see Councilmember Carbone has a question.
What time would that special meeting be?
I believe it's 6 o'clock.
Councilman Reed, 6 o'clock. It was December 10th?
December the 10th. That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And if council will allow, I'll go ahead and read each resolution, the caption as required by law out loud, and then the council can take one action at that time. So here we go. The first resolution is resolution number 2018-227, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Pearland, Texas, authorizing the power of eminent domain to acquire fee simple title to certain property for the McCard Road Extension Project, McCullough Road to Cullen Parkway, being a 0.4361 acre parcel of land located in the FB Drake Survey, Abstract 505, Pearland, Missouri County, Texas, and being out of Lot 4, Section 10, Allison Ritchie Gulf Coast Home Company subdivision, according to the plat thereof filed in Volume 2, pages 23 through 24, Missouri County Plat Records, and being out of that certain called 10.088 acres tract, as described in a deed executed on September the 30th, 1977, from Jose C. Rodriguez to J.M. Home and Company, Inc., recorded under Volume 1364, page 235, Missouri County Deed Records, for the construction, maintenance of road, utility, and drainage improvements on certain real property described herein, authorizing city attorney or his designee and other city officials to take such actions as are necessary to acquire said property located within the city by donation, purchase, or by the exercise of the power of eminent domain. The next resolution is Resolution 2018-229, a resolution of the City Council, City of Pearland, Texas, authorizing the power of eminent domain to acquire fee simple title to certain property from the McCard Road Extension Project, McCullough Road to Cullen Parkway, being a 0.3639 acre parcel of land located in the HTMB RR Company Survey, Abstract 243, Pearland, Missouri County, Texas, and being out of Lot 33, Section 19, Allison Ritchie Gulf Coast Home Company subdivision, according to the plat thereof filed in Volume 2, pages 23 through 24, Missouri County Plat Records, and being out of that certain called 1.318 acres tract described in a deed executed November 8, 1968, from Willie W. Jones at Tux to Robert L. Garner Jr. at Tux, recorded in Volume 1017, page 297, Missouri County Deed Records, for the construction and maintenance of road, utility, and drainage improvements on certain real property described herein, authorizing the city attorney or his designee and other city officials to take such actions as are necessary to acquire said property located within the city by donation, purchase, or by the exercise of the power of eminent domain. And the third and final resolution would be 2018-228, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Pearland, Texas, authorizing the power of eminent domain to acquire fee simple title to certain property for the McCard Road Extension Project, McCullough Road to Cullen Parkway, being a 0.1503 acre parcel of land located in the HTMBRR Company Survey, Abstract 243, Pearland, Missouri County, Texas, and out of Lot 1, Section 19, Allison Ritchie Gulf Coast Home Company subdivision, according to the plat thereof filed in Volume 2, pages 23 through 24 of the Missouri County Plat Records, and being out of that certain called 2-acre tract as described in a deed executed on August the 9th, 2002, from JEB Properties, Inc. to Brantley Investments, recorded under Missouri County Clerk's File number 02-041795 of the Official Public Records of Missouri County, for the construction and maintenance of road, utility, and drainage improvements on certain real property described herein, authorizing the city attorney or his designee and other city officials to take such actions as are necessary to acquire said property located within the city by donation, purchase, or by the exercise of the power of eminent domain.
So moved.
Councilmember Perez.
Second.
Mayor, I move that we move on items 6, 7, and 8 as described by the city attorney.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second it.
And a second.
Hey, our second man's out.
Okay. We're on 2, 4. We're on hold.
You know, I had to step out for a second. Would you mind reading it again?
Oh, nice.
We're on temporary hold here for quorum. 2, 4, 6. We have 6. Sorry about that.
We can move forward.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Staff report.
Nothing to add, sir.
Yeah, no further comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Staff has no report. We have, Mr. Secretary, we have motion second on the floor for three items 6, 7, and 8.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-0.
That information in the record, let's move down to item number 9, and ask Clay, City Manager,
Thanks, sir.
to present that for our consideration.
So council members had requested there be this item for discussion. We took the prerogative to provide some of the background, and this resolves around the fact that the city has municipal utility districts and has had those that are both in our ETJ and also in city. For the ones that are in the city, those are provided a property tax, a rebate, and currently that's all being done out of property taxes back to the MUDs. And that shows up in the city budget as part of our property tax levy as a debt service levy. And it's grown, and these are existing agreements and really locked into those. So anything we're talking about would be for future. But now it's $7 million that the city levies as part of our debt service property tax. It gets rebated back to the various MUDs as we described in the material. That's up, about $1.2 million, something like that, the last couple of years from what it had been. And again, that's all locked in. The logic has been, that part of that goes towards a rebate of what people are already paying in their property taxes or paying through other kinds of fees, water, sewer, and so they're not being double taxed on that. But the amount of that, we've changed that over time. The last couple of years, it used to be 15 cents. That was standard. We've gone to the last couple of years 10 cents equivalent. That's been rebated back, and so it's really a policy discussion. If the council would like to continue with these rebates for future agreements, and if so, to what level. There does need to be some for what people are paying for, as I said, with water, sewer infrastructure or stormwater, but that could be calculated. It doesn't, I don't think, have to be as high as it is, but part of that, and it made sense as the city was being to build out and trying to provide incentive for development and rooftops. But I think we could agree that we're well past the point of trying to entice more rooftops, and if that's slowed down or happened organically in the future without this incentive, that'd be all right too from our service perspective. And so, it's really council discussion about given setting a policy for how we would approach future such in-city MUDs. It's a complex topic and has some different implications in terms of how the city builds out, and then the future pricing and incentive for developers. And so I just wanted to present that background in general terms and, see if there's council discussion or direction that if you want us to continue status quo, or if you wanted us to develop something that said, we would only rebate the bare minimum that was necessary rather than at that 10 cent level equivalent that we've been doing. Really up to council how you see that.
When the council started the process of folding in some of the random development within our city, we usually had a fine development of a MUD district, and then there were smaller developments taking place that we frankly were not able to support or even build the facilities for. And it was an ideal way for us to get quality development of random pieces of property across the footprint in the city, and I think it served a very useful and a very positive fashion for us now. But now that we're able to, the smaller pieces of property are becoming more harder to get a hold of, and at least large enough for development. And the fact that we're developed ourselves to the point where we can take care of, maybe do a lot more support in putting the water, sewer, streets, and curbs and gutters and so forth in, in some of these random developments, I think maybe it's time for us to take a hard look at how we proceed with that in the future. But it served a very useful purpose, and it really helped the quality of development in the city at the time we were doing it. And I think it's something it was part of our development as a city in that process of making Pearland a very special community.
Mayor, I think you're right. And the thing about it too, I guess, at one point in time, previously, we had it to be non-contiguous to going into a different mud at a certain point, but we had a cap on it of 750 acres, I believe was maximum that the mud could be. And I don't know if that's still in place or if they could still go into existing mud from a different location or what.
The acreage limitation you're referring to actually was triggered, if you recall, the original 3 in-city muds were mud 17, 18, and 19.
Yeah.
And they were all 3 discontiguous muds. And the concern at that time with respect to the acreage, and why the council wanted to limit it at that time, was because those 3 utility agreements did not have a provision that called for the rebate to slowly be phased out over time. If you recall, 17, 18, and 19, the rebate goes on for those 3 muds until those muds are dissolved. And so that's why the 750-acre limitation was developed. Then once the new muds were developed with a phase-out plan, then the 750-acre limitation went away with that. Yeah.
I do think it'd be nice if we could start bringing those back into the city as normal and outside of the mud districts.
So can a new development opt into another intercity mud or not?
New developments can, and let's just hypothetically say somebody came along and wanted to develop 75 acres, they could petition the city for consent to be added to an existing mud. I think the question moving forward is whether or not, whenever they do enter into those muds, if the council consents, are you going to do so allowing them to be entitled to a rebate, or is that something that you feel like that incentive is no longer necessary? I think Mr. Pearson just referenced the concept that there's a certain amount that we're required by law. If there's any overlap between the taxing, the services that are being provided, then you have to provide some form of rebate there. And that's actually something that's called for by Chapter 293.11 of the Texas Administrative Code. It actually requires specifically that we agree to rebate an equitable portion of city taxes if such taxes are used by the city to finance elsewhere in the city services of the same type provided in the district. So if there's any overlap there, you have to be able to provide that. So technically, you could enter into a new, you could authorize a property be developed in a mud, and then for that property, they would not necessarily receive a rebate per se, not 5 cents, not 10 cents, whatever, as long as there's a provision that we're still obligated to pay back any overlapping portion. And that can be calculated on an annual basis, and that's something that we're required to do by law anyways.
Do we have any feel for what that amount is?
I do know that the previous finance director was doing those calculations on an annual basis, and it seemed to come back anywhere from 6 to 7 cents is what we were typically seeing when there was an overlap. And it could vary, obviously, from one to another, but that's what we were seeing.
So we've gone from 15 to 10, and kind of the floor would be 6, 7, somewhere around there.
Possibly, and I don't want to speak, for them without adequate research being done there. But I think the way you could approach that is that whatever you're required to rebate by law, then we're gonna rebate, and that could obviously something that could be included in any consent to any properties annexed into MUDs in the future.
And to me, that's sort of the rub, is if we wanted to move towards that as opposed to this 10-cent that we agreed to, that we believe obviously does the minimum and then some. So, and this is, just to be clear too, this is not presented as whether we do in-city MUDs or not. It's about the rebate amount for those in-city MUDs.
Or let's say if somebody was coming and wanted to form a new MUD, we're under no obligation in the development agreement to offer any incentive above the minimum. We have the choice of offering as much as we've done in the past. We're not required to, correct?
That is correct.
So it's really our choice of whether a developer who wants to come in requests this of us, and we can negotiate that as a component to the development agreement. And so, we'll give you this rebate if you give us certain beautification elements in the development. I mean, it's typically how we use that tool, correct?
Yeah, obviously, yes, correct. I mean, most recently, the newest in-city MUD was, of course, for what is the proposed Massey Oaks subdivision that'll be developing. In that particular one, I believe it was a 10-cent rebate. There was obviously a lot of off-site infrastructure that was negotiated through a development agreement, as you indicated. So a lot of the properties you're going to see developing are small properties that have development challenges moving forward, and obviously don't necessarily make sense for them to go out and create their own MUD for that. So they're going to be looking to get into one of our existing in-city MUDs. I think the question is if we're going to allow that, and the council would consent to that, then I think you have to weigh, one, does it make sense to even consent to put that property in a particular MUD? Some properties, it may not even make sense to consent to put it in a MUD, depending on the size and and the access to water and sewer and drainage for that property. And then if you do consent to include it in a MUD, then you have to weigh, then as you indicated, Councilmember, is that you're going to have to weigh whether or not it makes sense to provide a rebate above and beyond what we would be required to do by state law.
But we wouldn't have the ability to renegotiate an existing contract with a MUD that has a rebate component based on them wanting to expand to, say, some 20-acre offsite, non-contiguous development. Would we?
We could, for the new property they want to add. We could renegotiate the terms of that utility agreement and the rebate provisions for the property that's being added.
But nothing that exists already.
That is correct. We could not renegotiate that.
So for example, the development there across from Lakes of Highland Glen, that,
Highland Park.
well, no, the one that just came before us not too long ago.
Oh, yeah, the new Highland section.
Yeah, the new Highland section. It's 80 homes or 72 homes, something like that. That's what got me to thinking about all of this, because there's water sewer there. I mean, it's not like they have to run it in an extensive period or an extensive length anywhere. It's there. They just got to tap into it. So it got me to asking questions of Mr. Pearson on how the MUD reimbursement was, because I questioned, did it really make sense for them to really be a MUD? And that's why I asked the question of Alan Mueller that night about what would it do to the cost of the homes if he was not able to do a MUD. And he said it would add about $20,000 to the cost of each of those homes. So if that home was, $350, then he's going to have to charge $370 to get the money out of it.
And I would say that probably has an auxiliary effect to the homes around it, because once those houses sell for $370, then everybody else's values go up, because that's the comps for the area. And I think I would say that's probably a negative effect to most of the people who are paying taxes in that area. At least they're going to say that when it comes to budget time, and we're looking at adjusting the tax rate. I think my personal opinion is this: I think it's a tool we need to remain that needs to remain in the toolbox. We do kind of say, hey, look, we've had a lot of development, and maybe we're slowing down. I don't think we are as slowed down as we like to believe. And once McCard goes through, I think there's going to be a lot of development, particularly residential along that corridor, because that's going to be a main thoroughfare. It's going to be on the north side of town. I think that there's going to be large sections that are going to want to develop, and we're going to want it to develop as a quality project. Same thing with the south end on Bailey. I do think we need to be more deliberate with how we issue it, but I don't think we need to remove the tool. Because, frankly, without these incentivizations, Highland Glen doesn't get developed. It's just a standard streets and utility subdivision with a empty hole in the ground for the detention pond that's non-attractive. And that has a negative effect on the property values around us because those aren't attractive subdivisions and people don't pay a premium to be there. But I do think it's worth discussing it, with that new project and other projects that are coming forward. You know, how generous do we want to be with particularly these small tract developments that are coming in? They probably can't develop unless they get adopted. Actually, they won't develop unless they get adopted in the mud with the property values being what they are. And how much do we want to encourage that or discourage that, or how much do we want to use that tool for that purpose?
And you know, we have an awful lot of small pieces of property, I think you call them orphan blocks of land, that are adjacent to existing subdivisions that could be folded in and be more productive. If that's something we need to keep an eye on and maybe make some work into our decision process. I don't know whether it's our advantage to try to bring those odds and ends of vacant pieces of property adjacent to an existing mud into the mud district itself, and with or without a incentive with the support of the contribution that we're making in the process we have now. I don't know whether that's something that we need to take a hard look at.
Well, if I could, Member Moore, initiate the topic, and to me, after looking at this and thinking about a lot of discussions inside, I think it's good to give some exposure or transparency to the topic, because I don't think it's complicated and sort of flies under the radar. Nobody's talking about removing the tool, but to me, if you're asking for a suggestion, it'd be that the policy going forward for new in-city MUDs, that the rebate would be predicated based upon the minimum required, and then they could come forward and say, hey, we're going to do something really fancy, and then you talk about it from there. But at least people know from the get-go, that's where our starting point is. I think it's better than starting out at the 10-cent high, which I think
agree.
over-incentivizes
I agree.
and subsidizes these things. And to the point about the house prices, somebody's paying that on the road. I mean, and we hear about it, you all hear about it when people get their property tax bill and it's X, and there's lots of pieces in it, and that mud inside of that, they're paying that on top of everything else. So, that I think there's money going out and it's paying for it somewhere. It's whether you pay it at the front end, clearly as part of the house price, or whether you pay for it over time, the people that are left buying the house with the property tax bill annually.
One other thing to add is that when you add property on one end and then allow development to occur, obviously that's going to impact maybe not necessarily the debt maturity of a MUD, because they're pretty much locked in at whatever their initial debt maturity schedule is. But what it does do is it may delay the time period about which the tax rate can drop down, because if you recall, the majority of the MUDs have once it gets below 80 cents and then drops down to 65 cents, it will eventually go away. But besides just dropping into that category, the other thing that has to occur is that all the debt has to be issued by the MUD, and then the developer has to be all the improvements of the MUD have to be constructed, all debt issued, and then the developers have to be completely reimbursed before the rebate would actually go away. So it can have an impact on both ends.
Plus interest, right? Didn't the developer get interest back also?
No, there's no interest involved on the rebate issue.
No, the developer gets to recoup interest for that cost, right?
That would be something that's not coming from the city, though. I'm sure he's collecting on the other end, but maybe from the district, but not from the city.
The answer to your question is yeah. So the developer issues money to the MUD. The MUD's reimbursing their debtor, who is the developer. Interest comes along with that.
What is the impact for the city if we go ahead and approve this?
Well, there's nothing to vote on right now. It's just discussion time.
So, Mayor and Council, we have these individual contracts that come to you. It's sort of, as it comes, a traditional. If you wanted to, we could develop a policy statement for future in-city MUDs that would say something along the lines, we talked about or something else. And that way, at least that's a starting point that we could point to rather than trying to negotiate these on the fly every time as they come in. We just start with something that we say, hey, from the city of Pearland's perspective, this is what we'll do for an in-city MUD and the conditions we'll do it or won't do it and start from there. So we don't have anything that we point to right now, but if you want us to, we could develop something and bring it back to you.
I think that makes sense.
The question was asked, what was the impact to the city if we was to do this, to offer what we have to offer by law?
So that was the question Member Carbone said. I mean, the old calculations, and I think it's good for a frame of reference. Don't lock us into that, but the number was like 5 cents would be the minimum. So, if we did the calculations, it came up to be 3 cents or something like that. That'd be for the future, that much less rebate that we'd be levying a property tax.
And then what does that do for the city long-term?
So it'd be a long-term play. I mean, we're locked into these agreements and we're spending now, $7 million a year. So this would be something, it just would be adding to that cumulatively over time. So, it'd be something that you probably wouldn't this council wouldn't recognize or get credit for. It'd be 5-10 years down the road before they'll start to peel off and come down.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any impact to 2020 budget, but it may affect the 2030 budget or 2030.
It's a cost avoidance sort of thing. It's an expenditure avoidance.
Yeah.
So right now, policy-wise, we've just been going off of historically what we've done in the past.
Yes, sir.
Without a text document that says this is our established policy.
Yep. And as Member Morris said, there's a couple of projects coming in that are going to be asked for it. So the timing's probably good to at least consider that and get something going. By the same token, if there was an interest in doing something, there's not a lot of need for us to go try to write something and bring it back to you, and then you say, we'll just continue what we've been doing. So,
well, I think even if we're going to continue what we're doing, as long as we have a document that says this is what we do, so that there's some predictability on the developer's end to know what is historically offered with a little less research. I think there's value in that.
Clay, won't you put this, kind of give us this idea down on paper and kind of white paper and let us take a look at that? And I think your suggestion, I think, is good. What we did back when we started, it was kind of new to everybody, most of us, and it turned out to be, I think, a very positive thing at the time. But we're getting to the point now where we don't have, we need to make some changes on that. And maybe if we had sort of base some options, it'd be pretty good for us. Any other question or comment? Councilmember Reed, we left you out. I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. One thing that's not showing is the expected payoff, and maybe I'm missing it. I'm looking at the chart on page 4. The expected payoff date for these MUDs.
Right.
Oh, it's page 7. Page 7. So, but these MUDs can only extend themselves, right? I mean, it's not city controlled. Darren kind of alluded to it, but it's more or less, if they adopted or brought in, another development, nearby development into their MUD, it'd be up to the MUD to decide in their board, right?
A little bit of a distinction here. In order to add property to the MUD, they do have to come to the council for consent. It cannot be added to the MUD without your consent. The issuance of debt, they do not require your consent for in-city MUDs. It's a little bit different with ETJ MUDs, which not only do they have to have your consent to be created, but anytime the ETJ MUD issues debt, they have to come back to council for consent.
So has Silver Lake been doing that? I know this is kind of off topic, but have they been coming back to us to issue new debt?
Yes, they have. MUDs 2, 3, 6, and 16. 21 and 22, all 6 of those ETJ MUDs come back to the city council anytime that they're going to issue debt.
I don't think this is a voting issue right now, but I think
It's not, but I'd like to give some predictability because, we've got developers out there and we went from 15 to 10. So I think we do need to at least codify the 10, or if we want to go lower, I haven't heard consensus on that. But if I was on the other side, talking to some MUDs or working on development, and assuming that there's a 10-cent rebate, and now we're going to get down to something in the next few quarters, and we're going to say, oh wait, we changed our mind, we reduced it. Either way, I think we need to give clear direction. I'm fine. I guess I would like to see what that minimum is, and if that minimum is 7 or 8 cents, I'm fine sticking with 10. If that minimum's 3 or 4, then maybe we drop it again. But I don't know. I'd like to know what that minimum is, and if that's recalculated annually, maybe what it's been the past few years, and then make the call as to what that new rebate would be.
I would like to see the policy written as, here's the minimum for which we would be required to give you, however more can be offered as part of the development agreement in exchange for a higher quality development.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And like I said, I brought this up because it just kind of sparked when we were talking about this other development. So I just wanted everybody to have the background on it and understand a little, impacts of it and kind of, where we're headed with this long term. So I just wanted to bring it up as a talking point.
Would this, any modifications to policy or an establishment, more firm establishment policy, would this affect any ongoing negotiations that are in play?
Nobody, the ones that came up, they haven't come in, and it's a council decision, completely your prerogative whether you allow that into a in-city MUD or create it. So there's no negotiations or anything like that. They expressed that they were intending to do that, but there's no promises that have been made or anything like that. It's just past practice. So I think, well, at least we flagged the issue for those particular ones, but they shouldn't be counting on that.
And there are no pending petitions for consent to be considered for council at this time.
Clay, you getting any guidance?
Yeah. The only thing I'd say is timing-wise, to do that calculation of the minimum, probably take a little bit of time, just everything that's going on and what we have resource-wise. Policy, we could bring quicker. So if you were really intent that you want to know that number for the minimum, whether it was closer to 3 or closer to 5 or closer to 8, if you needed that, we'd want to wait on the policy. So, but if you just want a policy that says, we'll do it under these circumstances, et cetera.
I'm okay with waiting until we get that number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in no rush.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Does that complete our conversation here? Let's move to next item, which is item 10, which is Clay, that's your issue.
This is actually, again, another council just discussion request. And so the city requires that you have a minimum floor elevation depending upon where you're at and the floodplain designations. That's dictated by our building codes and other ordinances and regulations. We don't have, nor that we found anybody so far that has a maximum for a finished floor. So there's reasons for that. I mean, if somebody decided that they wanted to build it higher for their own peace of mind or protections or whatever, they could go do that. But the memo, I think, does a good job of saying there's some practical limitations on that for both infill and new subdivisions, and two different situations. So we were asked sort of to lay out the background. There was there's a subdivision off of Magnolia that had some questions because they raised it above what the minimum was. We don't believe that adversely affects at all the drainage systems in the area, and it's all designed out. And I think the test of time is that the newer projects that get designed and to our standards, they've held up well even in the Harvey event. Aesthetic wise and comparability. I mean, I guess there could be some considerations, but there's downsides if we told somebody they couldn't build a certain height, and then if they had an issue down the road, they could, I guess theoretically at least, come here and say, we wanted to go higher and you wouldn't let us. So that's some of the pros and cons, and just some of the background. It's really not something we've spent a ton of time thinking about or talking about, but we try to lay out sort of the background, how we look at those things as we go forward.
You know, if you'd built a fence around that, and we wouldn't have known it was raised or higher level. But I don't see I have a problem with that. It doesn't looks kind of strange, but that was a flood zone, and that area was something that had to be adjusted if it's going to be developed on. The problem is we don't want that sort of thing to happen on a single house within an existing subdivision, because we have one house higher than the others, which would be, their lots would be flowing water off on the rest of the neighbors.
And that's happened, Mayor.
Huh?
And that has happened.
And that's has occurred in Pearland, and
There's a house over in West Lee that's 4 foot higher than everything around it.
yeah.
There's one in Green Tea, but the reason is the floodplain map changed, the elevation changed, and the house, in order to be able in compliance with NFIP, had to build higher. I know there was a particular person that talked to me for quite a while about it. Their house, where they shared a driveway with their neighbor, the neighbor decided to raise the house and build a new one, and the criteria required it to be 3 foot higher. There's going to be those instances as the floodplain maps keep changing.
Well, and I brought this for discussion because of the development that's on Magnolia, the corner of Magnolia and McLean. All the development around it is 4 or 5 feet lower than what that new development is. There's a house that was built directly across the street from it on McLean that was built less than a year ago that is 4 foot lower than this development. So I find it hard to understand how that house was built at ground level, but this new development has to be, you know, so much higher than that one. I don't understand unless it's because of the volume of structures on that property versus one single structure being built. But I question that we have this development building up high there. There's vacant property on the other side of that, the south side of that, that I think would end up being developed, which will be homes also, I'm sure. And is that one going to be built elevated to the height that this one is?
I think it may be helpful if our engineering staff could explain what the EDCM currently requires, both in detention and floodplain mitigation for new developments.
Councilman Moore, Councilman Perez, with regards to current floodplain, is that it requires that we have mitigation associated. If it's in the floodplain below the 100-year, you have mitigation out of Chapter 5 of our EDCM with regards to fill mitigation. So they need to compensate for how much fill is brought in within the 100-year floodplain. They're required to offset that. So that leads to detention or the digging of detention basins to raise that. From that standpoint, then they need to get to their base flood elevation and then be 12 inches above that base flood elevation as a minimum criteria per our EDCM towards in Chapter 5. And then after that, it's up to the builder if they should so desire to go a little bit higher than that, if they so desire. But they are required to meet the 12 inches above the base flood elevation.
And with respect to managing on-site drainage associated with the development and
With regards to, I apologize, I interrupted on that, I'm sorry.
in response to how we calculate volume of mitigation within the floodplain.
So it's 1-for-1. Well, let me step back on that. Depends on which part, if we're in a regional detention area or not. We have some set up as 1-to-1, but usually it's 0.65 acre feet for acre of land. That is then what is contained. You're also only allowed to discharge what the pre-existing conditions are. So if it's grass or a native, there is a certain flow that comes out at a certain flow rate. That is what has to be released after development. The rest has to be detained and be metered off. Then also is that they take a look to keep the detention on site, and so you don't have any impacts to your neighbors.
You know, the ground rule we had of a 1 foot higher than any known level of water ever recorded by any governmental entity was put in place back in the early, I'd say, late, middle 1970s time frame. And, but even those that went in at that point, the 100-year floodplain has changed a little bit over the years, where it's a little bit higher than it was originally. And some of the houses are flooding, and but I think, Clay, didn't you have in this a provision for go up on the house, but leave the lot level the same, but you can raise the house? They do it in Louisiana quite a bit.
You mean like, what do you call it? Like they do down in Galveston? You mean like the piers sort of thing?
Where you have to have steps to get up to your porch.
I mean, I think, some of it's like,
It'd be kind of weird. I wouldn't want my house there if I had one like that.
frankly, I don't know that we see a big issue with, new subdivisions and elevations. I mean, it's all designed out, and if you're above the floodplain, you're out of the floodplain, and you've got to compensate for that and build a system that makes up for it. I mean, there could be, if we had a bunch of houses that wanted to super elevate and just starts to look weird, I guess, aesthetically, there were some are, do those steps and the rest of the neighborhood doesn't look like that. I mean, there'd be some, performance with that, but
They're doing that in Houston right now.
there's like Ireland, I think they've got some that are up and down like that and so forth. So
I guess with this one particular development, correct me if I'm wrong, but the detention is larger than what it really needs to be. So therefore, that allowed them more spoilage to be left on the building site.
Councilman Moore, to answer your question, yes, there was a little bit more. They also created a wet bottom type pond, which is about 6 feet deeper, which has about 6 feet of water in it. That is actually, as in our paper, also talks about the fact that also helps as a settling basin a little bit to help control sediment as well before it's discharged out into Mary's Creek. So they dug that pond and have it as an amenity pond as well.
And this agenda item basically is asking, does council want to put a cap on how high somebody can go up before they build a house? Right? And I guess my answer is no. If you want to build it up high, you've got to mitigate it where it can't run off into the neighbors. So if you want to go up 10 foot in the air, it's going to be cost prohibitive, but it's your land, your house you're building. Like the one on McLean, they could have built it 10 foot higher. Well, they probably would have if it was after Harvey. But, I mean, that kind of changed the game. I don't know that I want to sit up here and say after the devastating flood that we're going to put a cap on how high somebody can build their house. So I understand why we're having the discussion, but I'm not in favor of putting a maximum.
I mean, it sounds like more of an HOA issue down the line. I mean, HOAs are going to police their own. Typically, they're going to police their own neighborhoods, and so they may have, a maximum or minimum, or how high your grass can be. And so, I think with that comes the height limit that you can, how high up you can put your dirt to build a new house. We have some master plan communities throughout the city. You can't go and tear down a house in Highland Glen or Shadow Creek Ranch and put more dirt and build, 10 foot higher, because I'm sure the HOA takes care of that. So I'm not really sure that we need, a city ordinance that states, the same, but.
Just for clarification, this is more on the building side prior to the HOA even being developed.
Oh, okay. So like before, like when people buy private land, you mean?
Not necessarily private land. This is more like large developments. I think that development over there is 90 homes, 80 homes, something like that.
So this is more to tell a developer, hey, look, you don't need to build 10 feet in the air all these homes where it's going to run down on the neighboring neighborhood. Yeah. And where's that present at? Oh, okay. I mean, what does that say?
So I know there's a couple of rules that are when you're doing development that kind of guide you with this. One, there's I believe Chapter 11 of the Water Code, or Chapter 8 of the Water Code says that you can't modify historic drainage. You can't push more water onto your neighboring property. You can't prevent water from your neighboring property that used to flow across your property from flowing as it naturally did. Generally, that kind of guides when I review plans for cities that don't have detention criteria. That kind of guides us in hey, you still need to provide detention because you can't negatively impact your adjacent property owner. So when you couldn't build up and dam everybody around you and prevent the water from coming through as the natural course would allow. And also by virtue of providing the detention and the subsurface drainage system and controlling the release rate, you're managing the drainage within the subdivision as it is. So again, that's our criteria, the 0.65 acre feet per acre for increased impervious cover. It's high with respect to the area. So we're a little more diligent about making sure that we're managing storm sewer than our adjacent adjacent municipalities and unincorporated areas. So, I feel like we're doing enough. Just forecasting, I'd have a tough time even thinking how this ordinance would be written because right now our criteria is written. The finished floor is either respective to the street or respective to the 100-year water surface elevation. For that subdivision, the streets weren't in place. He filled to establish a street elevation, and then the building code would come into play with having to be at least 12 inches above the top of curb, and then we also have the criteria is 12 inches above the base flood elevation. It would be hard, I think, to even draft a criteria that says, at some time, existing elevations as they are, you can never build above that, even if you're coming in and adding fill dirt. If you're coming in and filling your lot, I just don't know how we would police it. I don't know how we would really enforce it. And I think personally, I think it's self-policing. Looking at that development, I think the developer built it as low as he could. I have some opinions about the surveying on that tract, and I think that may have led to why there's a difference in elevation between that and the Cavazos' house. But that's not something we can fix in a criteria. That's his consultant. If they had a bus in the survey and that shows a different elevation than what the Cavazos surveyor did, I mean, that's not something that we can modify through criteria. That's really the consultants that have to figure that out. I'm sure they took a good hard look at it before they went in and put all that dirt in there, because that's not cheap, even if they're moving it from one side to the other. So, not to belabor the point, I appreciate what you're hoping to accomplish, Member Moore. I just don't think that there's much need for it to be accomplished by ordinance. I think it deals with itself as developers trying to control cost.
Any more comments that council has to share?
No, I just want to say thank you for the discussion, and it is what it is.
I think it's been an interesting and very useful discussion because if we keep up this flooding we have now and the construction that's going in the region, I think we're going to be faced with a lot more of the issue. How high should you put your slab? I think it was good. I'd assume that the council has talked that out. I'd like to move on to next item on the agenda, which is mayor and council issues for future agendas. There were none listed here recently, so we may get some later. Next is the executive session on Texas Government Code Section 551.072, consultation with city attorney regarding the sale, lease, or exchange of real property. Obviously, in the executive session, we discuss these items with those in the executive session meeting, but we cannot make a decision in executive session. But upon return to open session, we do have New business item number 11 for council consideration, possible action regarding the sale, lease, or exchange of real property. So at this time, we will recess into executive session at 8:22. at 8:57. Moving in our agenda to new business item number 11, consideration possible action regarding the sale, lease, or exchange of real property.
Yes, Mayor, I'd recommend a motion of the City Council authorizing staff to proceed with the sale and exchange of real property as discussed in executive session.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Secretary?
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Council. Moving in our agenda to other business, where is none. Item 8 allows me to adjourn this property, this meeting.